Startup Camel, bringing you the best and the brightest of the Israeli startup scene. A new startup every week.
Welcome everyone, Idan Hershko here, bringing you the best and the brightest of the Israeli startup scene, podcasting from Tel Aviv in Israel. In case you are joining me for the first time today, you are welcome to join me every Sunday for an interview with the founders of the most exciting and innovative startup companies and entrepreneurs. If you like what we do, please visit our website at startupcamel.com and subscribe to have new episodes delivered right to your mailbox. Today, our guest on the show is Yaacov M. Yaacov is the CEO and a co-founder at Jifiti, which is giving users the ability to capture tangible products in real stores and turn them into digitally transmittable gift cards. Hello, Yaacov, and welcome to the Camel.
Hi, how are you? It's nice to meet you and to be on your show.
It's great to meet you too, and it's very nice to have you on the show today. Now, as usual, we are going to have two parts for this interview. The first part is going to be all about Jifiti and about your way to entrepreneurship. And the second part is going to be the camel race. I'll ask you a few quick questions and you will try to provide short but inspiring answers. Are you ready for this?
I hope so.
Excellent. Okay, so let's start with the name. Where is the name Jifiti coming from?
So that's a very good question, and the truth is that my CMO could probably give a better answer than I can. But we were looking for a term that was able to convey the idea of being able to gift quickly and personally. So in English, in a GIF, I guess, or in a Jiffy, is slang for quick. The J and the G of gift, I guess, are somewhat related. And as a side comment, there was really no availability on anything that was related to gift.com.
Okay. All right. So now we know where the name is coming from. So please tell us a little about yourself and about Jifiti.
Okay. So as I think we will I'll have an opportunity to discuss a little bit further, I think your description was very accurate of what it is that we do, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the broader notion of bringing the offline or in-store experience together with technology and an online experience. So our goal was to simplify the whole notion of gifting. We noticed that in the space of gifting, there are two major pains that consumers usually have, especially today when they may live very, very far away from their family, friends, or any other loved one. The two pains are as following. Number one is, how do you transport a gift from point A to point B? So in today's day and age, you basically have two options. You either buy a gift in your immediate locale, and you then take it to a post office or to a UPS or FedEx station, and you send it to the recipient. Now, obviously, that is assuming that you know their exact address, their zip code. You did it enough time in advance to make sure that it will be received in time for the event, et cetera, et cetera. And in addition to that, obviously, you have the cost of shipping. We found that to be a real logistical hassle. That was the first pain. The second pain that we found that people experience in the area of gifting is a much, much more fundamental pain, and that is what we call the appropriateness of the gift. Mm-hmm. How do you know what to buy? How do you know if they have it? If it's fashion, how can you get the size right, the color right? How do you make sure not to embarrass yourself, but on the other hand, ensure that you are sending a personal gift? Those were the two pains that we discovered that exist in the world of gifting, and those were the two pains that we set out to solve.
Okay, so before we talk about the solution you found to those problems, please tell us about your background.
So I actually grew up, went to school, and went to the army in Israel. My parents are American, and they moved to Israel when I was a year old, so I was fortunate enough to benefit from the maybe understanding and appreciation of both Israeli and U.S. culture, language, of course. But I really went through life until about a year ago in Israel. A year ago, I moved out to the U.S. to further develop many of Jifiti's business aspects, etc. I will maybe mention two phases in my life in Israel that I think left quite an impression on me. I went to quite an interesting high school, or yeshiva high school, which means it's a high school where you both you learn Judaic studies and general studies. It was an absolutely crazy place. It was a place that once upon a time, I guess, was considered to be very prestigious. It produced many great people who hold very high positions in today's economy, and so on and so forth. But during my time, I think it was in a very ambivalent state. On the one hand, the student body was extremely dynamic and energetic, but also completely crazy. And the staff was made up of very, very colorful people. The reason I'm mentioning it is because with all of the craziness, and that craziness ultimately brought to the closing of the school, it no longer exists in its capacity. But it did teach me something very, very important. Number one is a real sense of being open to different types of people and different opinions. And I'm not only including my peers, but the staff as well. There were people on the staff there who had the most radical views on life. And I found it to be tremendously interesting. And as long as you're able to take from every one of those people, it can really, I think, enrich your outlook and your approach. But the other very fundamental notion that I think I was exposed to is that there is no such thing as impossible. Anything you set out to do, especially if it's a team that is willing to work towards that goal together, is achievable. I think with all the craziness, we achieved some pretty radical things during those years. They weren't all necessarily what our staff and or parents wanted us to achieve in school, but they, I think, were impressive in any case. That was one. And I guess my military service also left quite an impression on me. I served in the Israeli intelligence and obviously was very well educated there, and was obviously exposed to capabilities and a mode of thinking that is refreshing and very helpful when setting out on your own to achieve some goals, especially when others say to you at the beginning that they are unachievable.
So you got that never give up, nothing is impossible approach from your teachers. And I wonder, when did you actually start thinking of becoming an entrepreneur?
So I don't know if this is a blessing or a curse, but unfortunately I find myself over, I would say already the last 10 years being in that position. I got married at the age of 23, and I was right out of the Army at the time. And I remember lying in bed, I think probably 2 weeks after I was married, and saying to myself, everybody spoke to me about getting married at a young age, and certain challenges that could bring along, but nobody really spoke to me about the day-to-day, very basic need of paying the bill at your local supermarket. How the hell do you do that? And that is really what, I guess, in a way, forced me or brought me to start my first businesses. And I did have businesses prior to Jifiti. I said to myself, there were certain needs that I saw that needed to be filled, and I set out to fill them while trying to obviously make a living for myself. But it's more or less kind of a pattern that I find myself sucked into. And often when I'm asked about it, it's very hard for me to say as to whether I ever took the time to choose. Am I going to go the more traditional route of being employed and receiving a salary at the end of the month, no matter what, or going down the other more risky route of entrepreneurship? I basically just found myself there, and ever since, there really has never been another situation. So it's very hard for me to compare it to another mode of life. It's almost like I feel I was born into this almost not by choice, and that's just what I found myself doing.
So you were never employed, actually?
I was employed by my own companies, but I don't think I was ever employed You know what? That's not true. While I was in school, I remember I once worked for a law office, and my wife always reminds me that I lasted less than 6 weeks. But that was a very, very short term and sometimes escapes my memory.
So what did you study in the university?
Study is an ambitious term. I was registered in law school in Hebrew U, and I actually finished, but I was definitely doing other things during that time. I don't know how much I retained. I used to come in for exams and cram before, but the problem is that when you do that, it goes in 1 year, and more or less when you put the pen down at the end of the exam, it's evaporated.
And I think I can really relate to that because I went to law school as well. All right, so before we move on, maybe you can talk in a few sentences about those businesses you had before Jifiti.
Sure. So it's very interesting. I was running 2 businesses that are very unrelated. They were related only for a very simple technical reason. So the first business I started was in the space of contact lenses and glasses. I, having a very high prescription, realized about 10 years ago that the price discrepancy between contact lenses around the world and Israel was extremely, extremely high. I also noticed that the way the market functioned in Israel was that every manufacturer of a specific brand of lenses had its own representative in Israel. And what that caused was it caused the optometrists to only contract 1 or 2 suppliers in Israel. So basically what used to happen is if you were a patient and you walked into an optometry store and they were going to fit lenses for you, they would usually give you maybe two choices of contact lenses, when really, in reality, they should be offering you many, many more. And obviously, there are different parameters and different materials and so on and so forth. And I felt that that was very inefficient. And then together with a partner, what we did was we started a company in Israel that sold lenses wholesale to these optometrists around the country. But we were importing all the different brands. So we really became a one-stop shop for all contact lenses related needs. And we were able to supply the optometrists with the exact material, the exact brand, the exact parameters that would fit the patient without them needing to shop around. So that was one business. And that was really my initial exposure to the world of retail. And definitely contributed a tremendous amount towards Jifiti, which, as we'll maybe speak in a few moments, is very much retail-based. The other business I started because I needed to fund the first business, meaning when we started the business of the contact lenses, we needed to buy inventory. So whatever savings I had, I used to buy that inventory, but I needed to make ends meet. And I realized that in a very, very different field, there was another issue, and that is in the area of psychometric exams in Israel, which are basically the equivalent to SATs in the United States. So in Israel, being a country that has mass immigration from many, many different countries, this test is offered actually in many different languages. The only problem is that it is not, there aren't courses, there isn't a material available in those languages for preparation for that exam. And what I started to do was I started creating courses teaching for the psychometric exam in English with English material. That eventually evolved into an English-speaking high school for immigrants, and I handed that off quite quickly and focused on my lenses business. But I was still involved in terms of curriculum development and obviously administration.
Wow, so you were involved in so many businesses and ventures before Jifiti.
Like I said before, I don't know if it was a matter of choice. I don't consider myself to be, more of an entrepreneur or more daring. It was almost a matter of necessity. One brought the other.
So you've told us about the problem you set out to solve, but I want to know about the moment in which you came up with the idea for Jifiti.
Okay, so I think you will find this in many, many businesses and definitely in startups that there is a cycle of evolution. So and that's, by the way, very healthy, I believe, in the world of startups. Evolving with the needs of the consumers, or even evolving according to what you learn along the way, is crucial, in my opinion, to the success of any platform or any business. And here, too, there's a little bit of an evolutionary story. The very, very first kernel of this idea took place when a couple of months before I got married. I was marrying a girl who is today, obviously, or not obviously, but still my wife. Actually, I don't know how she's still my wife, but she is. She, at the time, was living in the United States. And in the United States, before you get married, one of the to-dos on your list is to go and register for gifts. In Israel, this is something that isn't very developed. It may be catching on a little bit more now, but it's definitely not part of the culture. In the United States, it is a must. It is part of the cycle, or I would say even mandatory steps you have to take before you get ready. You go and you register. Before you get married, you go and you register for gifts. So you go to one of a couple of department stores that offer this service, and she took me to a large department store chain that offered this registry service. We walked into the store. We met one of the workers who sat us down and took some of our details, and then handed us one of these very large, old-fashioned barcode scanners. And what we did then for the next 2 hours, or actually I found myself doing it myself. My wife kind of got tired after a couple of minutes and sat down and said, "Call me when you're done." It's usually, by the way, the opposite, I believe, in terms of the gender split. And I found myself running around the store and scanning barcodes on different items in the store, and then eventually handing over this barcode scanner to that representative, who then synced it back then to some old-fashioned cradle, and they uploaded our list to the internet, where friends and family or guests of the event could access and purchase those items that we scanned. Now, for some reason, after that experience, I kept on walking around with the notion that there is much, much more to this concept than what I just saw. And it started dawning on me that actually this type of methodology is a perfect synergy between the offline experience, meaning the in-store experience. I was able to walk around the store, try things on, touch and feel, and the online experience, allowing guests to purchase online without obviously having to pick and choose, because I already did that for them, and knowing that this is exactly what I requested. And that was the first kernel of saying, wow, here's an idea that could possibly be leveraged in many different ways. And from there, and again, this was many, many years ago, and I actually was running the previous businesses in the meantime, because these things kind of needed to settle and needed to develop. I felt like I needed to develop before I did anything in this regard. But that definitely was kind of the Kickstarter. Many years later, I met an old friend of mine in a shopping mall who said to me that he has this idea that he wanted to discuss with me. And he starts describing an idea that was extremely similar to the ideas that I was developing based on my experience with regard to this registry and gift-giving platform, et cetera, et cetera. And that friend is obviously my co-founder and partner, Shoal Wise Band, today.
That is such a fascinating story, and it's an amazing coincidence that the both of you came up with the same idea and decided to collaborate. So you made up your mind to start Jifiti. For those listeners out there who aspire to start their own startup company, please tell us, what were the first steps? How did you put your thoughts together and started making them actionable?
Okay, so I will try to maybe focus on two categories. One category is what we did and I don't recommend doing. And the other category is things that we did do and I highly recommend doing. So at first, I spent a very, very long time on writing up a business plan.
Okay.
Now, a business plan, in essence, is not a bad thing and definitely should be done to some degree. But the time and the effort that I put into that is something that today I probably would have changed because I realized how you can plan, but you have to learn how to evolve with the market. You definitely have to have a vision. You definitely have to go for that, but that doesn't necessarily entail a 57-page business plan as I initially thought that was needed. So the first idea was how do we take this concept and like I said, expand it to make it more relevant to more industries, more retail outlets, more consumers, et cetera, et cetera. And we first asked a couple of very important questions. Number one is, why should a platform like that allows you to choose gifts that you want be limited to a wedding? Why wouldn't it be relevant to any type of gift-giving event? And number two was, why should it be limited to one store? I mean, after all, especially if you're thinking about wedding, it's probably the time that you make the most substantial purchases in your life. So normally you walk into a shopping mall and you go shopping in 17 different stores. Why all of a sudden when it comes to wedding do you have to limit yourself to one department store and create one registry? You're not going to create 17 different registries. And we said to ourselves, if we could create a platform that was catering to the consumer, meaning giving them a tool, first of all, that they would be able to hold in the palm of their hand, that would allow them to select items from any one of the partnering retailers or send items from any one of the partnering retailers, then we would really be achieving something that is substantially not only better, but solves a substantial problem that we find that consumers face. And we obviously then needed to study as to how and whether it was feasible to create a platform that would be what we call merchant agnostic and would allow many, many retailers to join. And we went to work. And the way we went to work was, at the beginning, we were all working our other jobs or other businesses that we had at the time. But you burn, the midnight oil, and you work whenever you possibly can on trying to come up with the first actionable kernel, as opposed to just the idea. And I've had many friends approach me over the years and say to me, okay, but how do you start? And I say, you start. You just immediately start. And they say, well, I can't code, but I can do this. So I say, so do that. And what is that? If it means sketching up the way your prototype is going to work. If you have a friend who can code, be generous with your idea, share it with your friend, and say to them, come on board immediately so we can kickstart this. It is not worth keeping it to yourself. Nothing ever happens by keeping an idea to yourself.
Yes, and I've heard Sheldon Adelson talk about this issue, and he said that he's been sharing his ideas with people around him for as long as he can remember, and he never had an idea stolen from him. So
look, if Sheldon Adelson says that, maybe I still stand a chance.
Definitely.
Look, I obviously understand the fear of it getting out and somebody else running with it. I must tell you that if you were to equate both fears, the fear of nothing ever getting done or the fear of someone running away with your idea, the first fear of nothing ever getting done should highly outweigh the second fear. I have been exposed to many entrepreneurs, and I can't tell you how few I have met that basically regret sharing an idea as opposed to those who regret not sharing an idea.
Okay, so could you please tell us what was that thing you wanted to recommend on doing as an entrepreneur?
Sure. So, it obviously depends on the field. If we're speaking about technology, then there is nothing that can beat a prototype. And a prototype does not have to be fully functioning. It doesn't have to necessarily achieve all of the goals that you set out to achieve. It just makes your idea tangible. And making your idea tangible serves, in my opinion, two purposes. Number one is you are obviously able to then present it to others, whether you're looking for partners or funding or whatever else it is. There is a huge difference between presenting an idea and presenting something tangible. Once again, even if it has nearly zero functionality. Number two, and I think this is much more important, is that once you start translating your idea into something tangible, you many times realize things that you may have overlooked in the previous stage, whether it's capabilities, possibilities, other obstacles and barriers, and sometimes other opportunities that you completely missed. But when you start translating the idea into a tangible technology or tangible item, those things surface and become very easy to spot.
Definitely. So if you guys out there have a brilliant idea and you're considering what the next step should be, try to think about building a prototype, which is something that will not only help you to understand your product better and what you need to turn it into a reality, but also might bring some new ideas and change the way you think of your product. Okay, so I understand where you got the idea from. And now if you could please share with us, how did you conduct market research?
So look, with regard to market research, there are two things that I can say today. Number one is that obviously today, most of the information you can access. It's only a matter of searching. And I'm speaking about the massive online resource that is at all of our fingertips. That's number one. Number two is, once again, this has to do with kind of the fear. I think that many are afraid sometimes to ask people in the industry to share information with them because they kind of fear rejection, or they assume that people will not be open to sharing information, et cetera. And that is, again, something that I would advocate against. Be daring. Pick up the phone. Go out and meet people in the industry. They may be potential competitors, but you will find that they are more willing to talk about what they know and what they've experienced than you possibly imagined. And that is exactly what we did.
Yes, and we actually had some guests on this show saying that they were selling their product before even building it.
And even if you don't feel that you are in the position yet to sell, you can simply go and say, I've been thinking about this, I've been researching this, and if you are a people's person and you know how to approach people and make them feel comfortable, they will be more than happy to share their knowledge and their information.
Definitely. Now, we talked about the idea and we talked about market research. Now, the next step is funding. So how did you get funded?
Okay, so obviously that is literally the $1 million question, right? And especially I must say that for me that step was extremely hard because in my previous businesses I did not take investors or funding, and all of a sudden you realize that if you really want to make a big splash and you really want to go out, and especially if you're going to go out to some very large markets, you need that type of funding. You understand that you will have to take investors. And to me, the fear, or I remember this type of emotion creeping up, was not giving up equity. That was actually the easier part of things. It was just the responsibility of taking other people's money, which was something I had a very, very hard time with. And I must say, to this day, that is one of the challenges, the personal challenges that I face. It is a tremendous load on my shoulders. But I was fortunate enough, I think, to have a couple of people, once again, who I shared the idea with, just as peers or as people who I felt that could give advice. And they encouraged me to go ahead and take a small amount of money from friends or friends of friends. I remember arguing with them fiercely and saying it's not healthy, taking money from friends, taking money from family, even if it's distant family. And this individual convinced me that it was the other way around. He said, listen, Yaacov, people who invest in these type of early stage ventures are big boys or big girls. They can make decisions for themselves. And if they decide to invest, yes, you have a responsibility, but they know exactly what they're getting into as long as you're entirely transparent. And even though at the time we were thinking of going to VCs, et cetera, and we knew that is a long process, he convinced me to go about it the other way around. He said, let's see if we can put together a smaller amount of money from friends and friends of friends, and let's get out there with a bigger prototype, a better prototype. And I think one of the smartest things that we did was to take his advice. And like I said, it was hard at the beginning to get around the notion of taking a funding from friends or distant family, but we took it in small bites, and it definitely is what jump-started the entire process. We were able, number one, to further develop this initial prototype, Number two is we were able, with that funding, to get in front of some of the largest players in the industry in the U.S. and first of all, validate our idea, and obviously then interest them to a degree where a more substantial financial raise became much, much more feasible.
Well, I think this is another wonderful example of why you should actually share your ideas with others. Now, let's talk about inspiration a little bit. Is there someone in your life that you would define as a role model or a mentor?
Okay, so maybe with your permission, I will choose two, and some of it may be a little bit obvious. I think that my mother, first of all, is a real role model to me, but not only to me, I think to all my siblings. She is a role model that is sometimes hard to follow because we find it to be so superhuman of her. But she is a woman of tremendous strength, tremendous perseverance. There's no such thing as not doing what you need to be doing. And if there are hardships, then you get through them because that's just part of the process. And she, I think, brought us up that way. We see that in her every single day, and it's inspiring. So that's for sure. And I can say that she was never in the startup world, and she obviously doesn't understand that type of high-tech technology, but it makes no difference whatsoever. It's a core value. It's a characteristic that is one that is relevant in any industry or any area of life altogether. That, I think, is number one. Number two is we've also been fortunate at Jifiti to have an absolutely exceptional team. And I think that when I try to think of a role model, I actually think of many of our teammates as role models. And when I say role models, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely accept every single iota of a person's personality. What I find myself doing many times is I find myself focusing on a characteristic of a person that really leaves an impression on me. So it could be a person that in many ways I don't necessarily see eye to eye with, but in a certain area I completely admire the way they go about things. And we have plenty of those people on our team. Another co-founder of ours, Meir Dudai, who also has quite an impressive track record. One of the things we always say about Meir is that he is always level-headed. No matter what happens, no matter what type of stress we're going through, he doesn't let it get to him in a way that makes him depressed or desperate or fearful. And that is obviously something that is to not only be admired, but one I think should strive to reach that type of self-mastery, especially in the area of startup where it is such a rocky road.
Your ability to recognize sources of inspiration around you amazes me. Now, talking about a rocky road, could you recall an instance in which you had to make a difficult decision as an entrepreneur?
Okay, I actually will then focus in terms of a decision on something that has to do with the actual Jifiti platform. And to some degree, when you invest yourself completely in whatever it may be, you feel emotionally connected to the outcome, to the product. And at some point, this was about a year ago, we needed to decide with regard to the platform whether we were focusing on the recipient or focusing on the giver. Now, this may sound very, very trivial, and one on the outside would not understand why that could cause any type of stress or why it is such a tough decision. It should just be an analytical decision. Well, the answer is no, that when you invest yourself completely in something and you feel like you really can accomplish great things in different areas, it is very hard to give up on one or another. And I honestly remember the feeling of needing to choose, and we decided that there is no such thing as saying that both of them are primary targets or primary customers. You always have to have a primary customer or a primary call to action and a secondary call to action. And making that decision was like choosing between your two children. That was extremely, extremely hard.
How did you decide eventually?
So this is interesting because it ties right back to the team. When you surround yourself with people that you really respect, and like I said, you respect their opinions in various areas, I find myself literally just taking everybody's input at the same degree of importance. And it becomes a democratic process, but not even a process where you have to count votes. It is an open discussion where people who come from very, very different angles, sometimes very, very different walks of life, express their opinion, and sitting around a table knowing that, for instance, you have, as we do, 5 people who are considered to be management, and we make these decisions mutually, the decision kind of floats to the top. It's part of that is the majority, part of that is the convincing that goes around the table, but it's not really debatable once it surfaces that way and everybody has been heard and everybody has had a chance to try to convince the others.
And through this process, you all understand what is the right answer.
Correct. And that's as long as you're open-minded. So you make a decision, but you know, and you know, I don't know if we have much time, but maybe we'll touch on that in different areas. You know that the most important thing is to be very attentive to the market and to your consumers, and they will prove you right or wrong as you go along.
So was it eventually a wise decision?
So I think we're still at the stage where it would be very hard for me to give you a definite answer. I don't, let's put it this way, I haven't reached a stage where I regret that decision. So I guess that means that at the moment that was the wise decision. And we definitely have learned a lot by going down that route.
All right, now I would like to address a different subject and talk about success. How do you measure success, and when will you feel you've reached success?
Okay, so success is a big word, and you know, obviously there are ways of measuring success that are very tangible. So an entrepreneur in our area that sells the company or is acquired by a large company for a nice sum of money obviously would consider that success, and that's undeniable. That is definitely success. But there's kind of more of an emotional ingredient, and that is the general feeling that you have on a day-to-day basis. And a general feeling that you have sometimes actually when things aren't necessarily going the way you hoped they would go. So you will inevitably have bumps in the road. If you can feel a feeling of success even while you're overcoming those bumps, then I think that's the ultimate goal. Success is knowing that you're doing something useful, you're doing something that is improving an industry, improving somebody's life, improving communication, improving the previous situation. And that brings a tremendous amount of gratification. Now, obviously, we all are in the business in order to generate value for the investors, for the shareholders, for the team. But for instance, seeing the satisfaction in the team's eyes, those who spent all day and all night working on something, is a tremendous feeling of success. And I believe that is what really makes the wheels go round. Yes, there is a prize at the end or a potential prize at the end. But that alone is not what drives people on a day-to-day basis.
I have to say, I love the way you describe success. You focus on intrinsic motivations as providing value and on the enthusiasm of your team members rather than the end gain. And I believe that eventually this kind of motivation has the potential to change the world. All right. Now, what do you think the future holds for Jifiti?
So let's speak at least about the closer future that is a little bit easier for me not to predict, but at least to aspire to. So we have found ourselves in a situation where we have been able to partner with many, many U.S. national retailers. But moreover, what we found is that the core of the technology that we develop, like I said before, through evolution, can really solve many, many issues that are in the what we call B2B space. So yes, Jifiti has developed a platform that caters to end consumers, but its technology can better the situation of many businesses or many business systems. We believe that the year of 2014 we will put quite an emphasis on our B2B development. Now, obviously, that translates eventually into going to the consumer, but deepening and broadening our relationships and partnerships with large retailers in the U.S. is really where we're going. For example, maybe this airs on Sunday, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. So maybe I'll just mention here, I think this is probably the first time that this is announced publicly, but we have been chosen a couple of months ago to power IKEA's first gift registry platform.
Wow, that's really impressive.
Thank you. I mean, we're starting off. Our contract at the moment is to power their first registry in one of their flagship stores in Portland, Oregon, and we built a dedicated platform for this purpose. Obviously, based on all of our technology, but in terms of the interface, it is a dedicated IKEA gift registry platform, and that is being launched actually in a week from today. So those type of relationships is what we believe that we are going to be focusing on during 2014.
Excellent. Great news for you guys. So what would be the next great goal for you?
So I would say on a high level, the goal is to become the go-to for gifting. We believe that we have both developed the technology, but also developed the expertise in all that is included in this area of gifting. We believe that we have streamlined gifting. We believe that to some degree we've reinvented gifting. Just as an anecdote, to see on our systems some of the communications between people who live far away from each other through our platform is absolutely heartwarming. And we believe that we are able to become kind of just like, for instance, in the payment world, PayPal is almost synonymous to online payments. We would like to become the same for gifting.
That is definitely a great vision, and it sounds to me like you guys are on the right track. Now, before we move on to the second part of the interview, I want to ask you a couple of more questions. The first one is, where are you guys working from currently?
The vast majority of our team is based out of Israel, based out of Modi'in. Shaul Weisman, my co-founder, and myself, we moved out to the United States, and we focus here on marketing and business development. We have a few more team members here who help us in that capacity, but the vast majority of our team is based out of Israel. We have a big TV in our office here with a dedicated Skype machine, not the one, by the way, that we're on, and another big TV in their office with a dedicated Skype machine. And we sometimes forget that we are actually about 6,000 miles away because we are working together, obviously, on an hour-to-hour basis. They work crazy hours. We work somewhat crazy hours in order to overcome the time difference or time zone difference. But that is where we are based.
And Skype is such an important tool in connecting you with your team right now. And speaking of the team, my next question would be, are you hiring?
Okay, so that is a very, very good question. We find ourselves, I many times find myself answering, well, I'm not sure, and then 3 days later, frantically hiring, because that is just the nature of a startup. You have a deal that is signed, or you have a project that is coming to the pipeline, and then all of a sudden you're running after resources. So I think the general answer is yes. We have especially expanded our team in Israel. I think we've accomplished quite a bit with a small team. And I would say to all of those out there, if you are a person that is not only technological, most of our team in Israel does technology development, but also creative, ambitious. You're willing to work extremely, extremely hard, but reap the fruits of your labor by seeing the products or the work that you have toiled at being launched with large names in the U.S., then please come see us. We would like to meet you. I believe that one of the reasons that our team stays so late in the office is because of the atmosphere. It is an atmosphere not only of people working alongside each other, but really working together towards a joint goal, and really achieving that success or satisfaction that we spoke about before, not only because of the potential prize at the end, but because of that ongoing feeling of accomplishment.
And where should our listeners send their resumes to in case they're interested?
First of all, you can feel free to email us at team@jifiti.com. Jifiti, by the way, is Jifiti. Sometimes a little bit difficult to spell, although we purchased many of the similar domain names, so we can kind of not miss out on any communication. Another great way to contact us, and we really like this, is if you download our app, we have a pretty cool function there of chatting with us in real time from within the app. We love doing that. It'll give you a good idea of what we're up to. When you browse our app, you can obviously find it on any one of the app stores, Android, iPhone. You can play around with the upcoming IKEA app. And you can go to our online, to our website as well, where you will find a lot of content, functionality, and obviously contact us forms. But Team at Jifiti does the trick. And if you really want to get immediately to the right person on the team, just email Eran, E-R-A-N, at Jifiti.com, who manages all of our development and actually product. If you look at his bio on our desktop, you will see that we still haven't discovered when he sleeps. So chances are that you will receive a reply no matter where you're emailing from in the world within a very, very short time.
Very well. Okay, so it is time to move on to the second part of the interview, the Camel Race. I will ask you a few quick questions and you will try to provide short but inspiring answers. Are you ready for this?
I am ready.
Great. Okay, so the first question is, please give us a glimpse into your toolbox, one tool you use at work that you think our listeners should know about.
Real early adopters of Kik, K-I-K, which is one of the instant messaging platforms. I think we started using them probably 2 months after they launched. They've actually grown to become one of the bigger ones. One of the reasons we did that was because we were already then traveling quite a bit and working from different time zones on different devices and switching between devices. And as opposed to some of the other instant messaging platforms, it is not connected to your actual device. So no matter where you're on, you're able to communicate either with an individual or a group.
All right. What's the best tip you ever received before a presentation or a meeting with an investor?
Cut your presentation in half. And if you think you have already cut it in half, so cut it in half again. And then take out as many words as you possibly can. Okay.
If you could go back in time and change one thing in this startup journey of yours, what would you have done differently?
I would have launched even sooner. I once heard a quote by Reid Hoffman, who said that if you are not embarrassed at your first released platform or app or whatever it may be, then you launch too late. I agree with that 100%. Launch the most minimal feasible, I guess it's a well-known theory of the MVP platform that you possibly can, and add on to it or modify, change, tweak as you go along. Don't be bashful to go public.
Now, are you a reader? And if so, what is your favorite book?
So unfortunately, most of my reading is my email inbox. But I would say this is really out of left field. My favorite book of all time is called The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon.
What would be your advice to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Go for it now. Don't wait until tomorrow. Begin with whatever it is that you have. The rest will come.
Which company from the Israeli startup scene do you think we should pay special attention to?
I probably would sound very strange if I said, and not very strange, I'm saying very, maybe banal if I said Waze, because it's probably said by everybody, but I'm going to say it anyway. And even though they are not it's hard to call them a startup any longer, but I think that there's a lesson to be learned from them. I believe, and I found myself doing the same, that if you ever try to describe what Waze set out to accomplish, when they set out to accomplish, most people in the world will think you're completely out of your mind, and completely too ambitious. And nevertheless, not only did they do it, but they did it in a way that changed the way people travel. And therefore, I would say, and this may sound very colloquial, do not be dissuaded or turned away from any type of idea or ambition you have. It is doable, it is plausible, and especially in today's world, with the technology and with the access that you have of almost any resource around the world, there has to be a way.
And now for the final question, I want to ask you, what are you doing tonight after switching off?
So I believe that I will switch off for 40 minutes and then switch on again, during which I will probably watch an episode of The Good Wife with my wife.
Okay, all right. Yaacov, it was a pleasure to talk to you, and I thank you very much for this conversation. And now please let our listeners know how they can reach you, and we'll say goodbye.
Okay, thank you. So reach me at Yaacov. Yaacov is Yaacov at Jifiti.com. I'm pretty good about emails. I try not to go to sleep before I have at least read the email and start it, so I can take care of it over the next coming days. If you don't hear from me immediately, I do want to say that I am committed to answering you. It may take me a day or two.
Excellent. Well, for those of you who wish to know more about the Israeli startup scene and about Yaacov Martin and about Jifiti, please check out our website at startupcamel.com, and you can also find us on Facebook. Just look for Startup Camel. Okay, thanks for listening to another episode of Startup Camel, and of course, please join me next week for another interview full of insights, inspiration, and motivation from the Israeli startup scene. Well, that's it for now. This is Idan Hershko signing off. Goodbye!